Let's stick with this energy debacle, but strip away the politics and catch up again with Aidan Morrison, who's the Energy Program Director at the Centre for Independent Studies. Thanks for joining us again, Aidan. I know we only spoke to you last week about this very issue, but this new report from AEMO about the security of the system just bears out everything you've been warning us about for so long, right? We are headed to an energy grid that simply can't function unless we have some drastic action soon. What are your thoughts?
Look, I think that's right. I did post publicly that we wouldn't be able to close Eraring in 27 as planned about 4 or 5 months ago. That was around the time when our grid operator, Transgrid, actually produced a report saying that they didn't see any credible way of acquiring the synchronous condensers they need to replace that important security service that they provide to the grid in time for Eraring to close at that point. So I assumed this was going to be coming, and now we've got the market operator finally confirming it, and now the rest of the mainstream media are catching on and reiterating that. But the writing has been on the wall for quite some time. The closer we get to actually pulling the plug and trying to switch things off, the more we realise that it's complex and slow and difficult to replace these assets that have provided a very secure, very reliable service for a long time. So the nearer we get, the more reality bites, and we're just learning that today. We've got to extend Eraring.
Well, of course, Eraring should have been closed according to the original estimates in this year, actually, and it's only government intervention and the promise of more subsidies to keep it going because they are in such a shambles. Now it looks like there's going to have to be another extension. This is going to have to be underwritten by taxpayers, of course, because these coal generators, they've been forced out. They've been deliberately forced out by policy and the market, so they haven't been able to spend money on upgrading their equipment and the like. So no doubt there'll be more taxpayer subsidies involved. But is it even 2029 or the like's going to be too soon? Aren't they going to have to try and invest in Eraring and keep it going for much longer as the nation's largest coal-fired generator?
Look, I think they will, but I'll just give a countervailing view there on the question about the subsidies, because what's actually happened in New South Wales is the New South Wales government did promise them an underwriting offer, an underwriting option to commit to staying in for another couple of years to 2027. But what's actually happened is that Origin has gone to them each year and said, we'd rather have our profits uncapped than accept your underwriting. Sure. So even though they've been squeezed by this rooftop solar in the middle of the day, they're still able to command the price in the evening. So the volatility has actually not caused these guys as big a business problem as we thought they would. They're still actually sitting pretty because at night time they can choose what they get paid because the sun goes down. So even though the market's more volatile, these operators actually, I suspect, are actually quite profitable at the moment, and they will remain that way. So as soon as the government...
they've been offered government subsidies effectively to keep going, but they haven't required it. So that presumably a similar deal in the future. In case it's not profitable for them, they're sort of underwritten. But that's good news that taxpayers haven't had to bail them out. But how long do you think that they'll need to keep going? And or more to the point, how long could a plant like Eraring keep going without massive maintenance expenditure?
Look, it was about 2031, 32 that they were planning to close before. So I think there's no reason why that earlier notification could not be extended out to in terms of how long their plant could exist. When we'll need them for, I think at least 2033 to 35. And the reason I say that is at the moment, all the backup power that we have in New South Wales comes from snowy hydro, or when the wind is blowing, a whole cluster of wind that is around Canberra, just north of Canberra. And at the moment, that power can't get into Sydney when we have high demand and when the wind is blowing. Okay, we already have instances such as last Wednesday when the price hit the cap, $20,000 a megawatt hour, and we were actually sending the power over to Victoria where they had negative prices. So we don't have the transmission to get the backup power from snowy hydro if and when that comes online, or more wind in that concentrated area around Canberra into Sydney anyway. And we're seeing the consequence of that play out in havoc in our grid at the moment. And the line to fix that is called Sydney Ring South, and it doesn't look like that's going to be built until 2033-35. It's been delayed and pushed back yet again by the regulator and Transgrid. So it doesn't seem that the right priorities and the right sequence is being met to let coal leave the grid anytime soon at all.
And can we have enough synchronous power in the grid? Can we have enough system inertia? Can the grid be stable without baseload power?
Look, if you bought enough synchronous condensers, there's no reason why you couldn't. It's a relatively mature, relatively well-known technology. But what's happened is it's actually quite a costly technology to have a whole bunch of spinning masses of metal to replace the spinning masses of metal that actually generated power. So replacing that has always looked expensive. So the go-to for the whole industry has been to say, oh, we don't want to spend money on synchronous condensers. Let's hope that something else comes along. They've waved their hands around hoping that batteries would somehow fix this, and they haven't. And now we're being faced with the reality that we actually have to buy the synchronous condensers. So if we bought a whole lot of them, no reason why it wouldn't work. But we've been avoiding buying or committing to buying a whole lot of these because it is so clearly expensive and it would go against the narrative that renewables are cheap. So that's the situation we're in right now.
Thanks for joining us again, Aidan. Aidan Morrison there from the Centre for Independent Studies.